In this video, we'll delve into the story that occurred in Florida, USA. On July 14, 2012, 29-year-old Adrianne Robert was found without signs of life by her roommate. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't breathing. CCTV cameras played a crucial role in investigating this case, helping detectives to find and arrest the criminal. Adrianne was born on January 4, 1983 in Brunswick, Maine. She graduated from Leavitt High School in Maine in 2001 and the University of Maine at Augusta in 2005. In 2007, she moved from Maine to Clearwater, Florida. Adrianne's family and friends described her as a beautiful and kind person, always happy and vibrant. She looked forward to the future with enthusiasm. She and her boyfriend Justin were getting ready to start a life together. Adrianne was renting a house with her friend named Jay at the time. The relationship with Justin was moving to a new level, and in July 2012, they found a house where they planned to move in together. Adrianne packed up her things and decided to throw a goodbye party on the evening of July 13, 2012. She told her boyfriend Justin that she and her roommate Jay were going to go to a movie or a bar or something. Justin could not join them because he had an urgent business to do. At the same time, Justin did not object to Adrianne spending the evening in Jay's company. After all, they were not only roommates but also friends. At first, Jay and Adrianne celebrated at home. They had a few drinks, remembering bright moments from the past, but then decided to continue the night somewhere else and went to the Diamond Dolls strip club. This place still works today and looks like this from the outside. At 3:34 a.m., Jay called 911 and informed the operator that he had just returned home and found his roommate without signs of life. Jay said that he and Adrianne were at a nightclub, but she left earlier and he spent some more time there. And when he got home, he found her on the bathroom floor. Her eyes were open, but she wasn't breathing. There were also signs of a struggle, which indicated a crime. The operator asked Jay to concentrate and perform CPR on Adrianne, giving him instructions. Jay followed them all, trying to start Adrianne's heart until the medics arrived. Unfortunately, when the ambulance arrived, she was dead, and they could not help her in any way. She was pronounced dead at the scene. The police had to answer the following questions. Who took Adrianne Roberts' life? And was her roommate connected to it? They started by thoroughly searching the house, examining every closet, and looking under every bed. The police needed to make sure that the criminal was not hiding somewhere in the house. The first thing the detectives and forensic experts who arrived at the crime scene noticed was the absence of forced entry signs on the front door. Adrianne was lying on the bathroom floor. She wasn't wearing any clothes except for a bra. The cause of her death was a stab wound to the chest. Signs of a struggle in the bathroom indicated that Adrianne was trying to protect herself. The fact that she was almost naked made the detectives believe the criminal was a man. They had to wait for more detailed information from the forensic experts who conducted the autopsy. Upon further inspection of the house, detectives found something strange. While looking around Adrianne's bedroom, they saw that someone had cut off part of the sheet on her bed. Without a doubt, there was a reason for that. Detectives suggested that's how the criminal was trying to destroy the evidence. Perhaps the criminal's DNA was on the sheet. Yet, it was strange that the one who did it did not take the whole sheet. After all, the remaining part of the sheet also contained some DNA. They found something similar to seminal fluid and sent the samples to the laboratory for analysis. It also turned out that Adrianne's car was not in the parking lot next to the house, which meant a criminal could have stolen it. The police searched for possible witnesses to the crime and put an APB on the victim's car. To solve this case, detectives needed to learn every detail of the last hours of Adrianne's life. But first, they had to tell her family the tragic news about her. What happened to Adrianne came as a shock to her parents. They could not believe that someone had deprived them of their beloved daughter. Adrianne's boyfriend, Justin, learned about the incident on the morning of the next day. When he saw that the police had cordoned off Adrianne's house, he immediately realized something was wrong. The detectives informed him that Adrianne had died last night. Criminals often return to the scene of a crime, and given this and the fact that Justin was in a relationship with Adrianne, the detectives began to check him out for involvement in the crime. The closest people become the first suspects. It is a common practice, and nothing is surprising about this. On the same day, about a few hours later, they found Adrianne's car a few blocks from her house. The headlights were on, and the keys were in the ignition. The abandoned car only confirmed the assumption of the investigators, who believed that the criminal used the victim's car to leave the crime scene. Forensic experts carefully examined the vehicle's interior, hoping to find something that could help solve this case. Investigators turned to the CCTV footage to find who was behind the wheel of Adrianne's car. Unfortunately, the place where the police found Adrianne's car had no cameras. Still, there were cameras on neighboring buildings. Looking through the recordings, the investigators saw a man in shorts with a baseball cap on his head and long hair. It was about at the same time when the 911 call came in. He was slowly walking in the opposite direction from Adrianne's car, and it was crucial to determine where he went next. There was another surveillance camera around the corner, but to the great disappointment of the investigators, this man went the other way. Thus, they lost his trail. They watched the recording dozens more times, hoping to see something they hadn't noticed before. However, it was hard to see anything other than the general features of this man because the recording was made at night. Interviewing witnesses gave the police new information to think about. Sitting on the porch of his house at night, one of the neighbors saw Adrianne and a man running past on the sidewalk. It was strange for several reasons. Firstly, it was late at night, and secondly, it didn't seem like they went for a run. Adrianne was wearing a dress, not sportswear. Moreover, she was holding shoes in her hand. The man who was running after her wasn't in sportswear either, but at the same time, it didn't look like stalking because Adrianne wasn't screaming or calling for help. Therefore, the neighbor did not attach much importance to what he saw. As I mentioned earlier, the investigators needed to restore the chronology of events preceding the 911 call about Adrianne. The victim's roommate, Jay, was invited to the police station for questioning. After all, Adrianne went to the club with him, and he found her on the bathroom floor later. At least, that's what he claimed. During a conversation with the detective, Jay said he and Adrianne had a few drinks at home and then went to Diamond Dolls. They used to go there when they wanted to relax and get away from everyday problems. According to Jay, they went there on foot, as they had already consumed alcohol and did not want to get behind the wheel in such a state. Therefore, the police decided to focus on Diamond Dolls, as visitors with a dubious reputation often come to such places. Jay said he and Adrianne came to the club around 10:30 p.m. and stayed there for several hours. When they were sitting at a table, another guy they had never met before joined them. Jay described him as African American, with a beard and a baseball cap. A few hours later, Adrianne decided to return home, and Jay allegedly stayed. After Adrianne left, he noticed the guy sitting at the table with them had also left. Trying to verify Jay's testimony and find new clues, the investigators went to Diamond Dolls. They did not doubt that the club had surveillance cameras that would allow them to determine whether Jay was telling the truth or whether he had something to hide. The wide viewing angle camera aimed at the road recorded everyone who came to the club and left it that evening. Looking through the footage, the investigators found the moment Jay and Adrianne appeared at the club. They were calm and nothing unusual was happening. The other camera was at the entrance to the club. Moreover, the recording quality was pretty good. It allowed the police to make out the people's faces and clothes. The CCTV footage confirmed Jay's testimony. He left the club alone at 2:53 a.m. He went outside, crossed the parking lot, and walked towards his house. It also confirmed that Adrianne left the club earlier than Jay. The cameras captured her leaving the establishment at 1:38 a.m. The most observant viewers probably already noticed that something is wrong here. When Adrianne came to the club, she was wearing a dress and something that looked like a jacket. But when she goes home, she's only wearing a dress. Adrianne had left the club and was about to go home, but 4 seconds later, a man in a baseball cap came out of the club. He ran out after her to return the jacket she had left inside. After he handed the jacket to Adrianne, they seemed to be talking about something. We will never know what they were talking about at that moment. However, instead of returning to the club, this man followed along with Adrianne. After leaving the parking lot, they turned right. As you can see, this street is not busy. There are practically no houses here. Did Adrianne feel in danger at that moment? Perhaps. We'll never know for sure. Comparing the man caught on camera at the club and the man seen next to Adrianne's abandoned car, investigators concluded they were two different people. Considering all the circumstances preceding her death, they decided that the culprit was most likely the man they saw on the club's CCTV footage, and the man from this recording could be a random passerby. In any case, the police were working through all versions of what happened and wanted to give answers to Adrianne's parents as soon as possible. Her family came to Florida to pick up her things. The investigators met with Mark and Dolores and promised them to do everything possible to find and punish the criminal. According to her parents, Adrianne was a friendly person with no enemies. She got along well both with her boyfriend Justin and her roommate Jay. Investigators believed that Adrianne did not really know the person who took her life. Soon, the report from the laboratory came. Although the criminal cut out part of the sheet, hoping to evade responsibility, forensic experts still found male DNA there. Moreover, it was not only on the sheet, but also on Adrianne's body and the walls. When the investigators checked the obtained DNA against the database, they were disappointed since there were no matches. Thus, the police had the DNA of an unknown man and CCTV footage from the club where Adrianne spent her last evening. At this investigation stage, detectives considered the footage the main clue necessary to solve this case. They again examined the recordings, but this time, they watched not only the recordings made at night, but also the ones made during the day, and it brought results. About 8 hours before Adrianne's death, investigators saw the same man with whom Adrianne was talking in the parking lot and who left with her. The police now had a clearer image of his face, but that's not all. Trying to figure out how this unknown man got to the club, the investigators saw that he had come by taxi. The phone number printed on the taxi body was visible on the recording, and it was not difficult to determine the brand of this car. Now, it was much easier to identify this man. Detectives found the phone number that ordered a taxi caught on footage near Diamond Dolls and discovered that this phone number belonged to Thomas Frederick. Comparing his photo on the driver's license with the image of the man on the CCTV footage, the detectives realized it was the same person. Now, Thomas Frederick has become the main suspect in this case. The police needed irrefutable evidence to arrest him. The recordings from the cameras alone were not enough. Hence, they secretly watched Frederick. The police were afraid to scare him off and decided to get his DNA without his knowledge. The officers watched him for a week and a half, waiting for the right moment. They followed him to work. They watched him at his house all night. They were always there, patiently waiting for him to give them something. And it brought results. One day, Frederick threw a cigarette butt on the road. They picked up this cigarette butt and sent it to the laboratory for DNA analysis. It was necessary to find out whether Thomas Frederick was the person who left traces in the house of Adrianne Robert. While waiting for the results of the tests, police officers continued secretly watching him because they feared he would leave the state. Soon after, a report everyone was waiting for so much came from the laboratory. The conclusion that the experts made wasn't surprising. The DNA on the sheet, on the walls in the house, and Adrianne's body belonged to Thomas Frederick. After receiving this information, police officers arrested him and brought him to the police station. During the interrogation, the man said he often goes to different clubs and bars and almost always makes new acquaintances there. When the police showed him a picture of Adrianne Robert, he said he met her at Diamond Dolls. Adrianne allegedly treated him to a drink, and then they danced and chatted. According to Frederick, he went to work after the club. But the CCTV footage refuted his words. It showed that he had left with Adrianne. When the detectives pointed out this inconsistency, he said that he and Adrianne walked together to the end of the street and then went in different directions. Sounds convenient, right? Especially when it is said by a person who may face life imprisonment. When asked if he had ever been to Adrianne's house, Frederick replied he did not remember because he had drunk too much. Thus, he began to refute his own words. Or perhaps Frederick miraculously had only a few memories about that night. He remembered they had reached the end of the street and then parted in different directions. The man remembered going to work after the club, but he somehow didn't remember being at Adrianne's house. The investigators knew he was lying because they had a witness who saw Adrianne running barefoot, holding her shoes in her hands, and this man ran after her. When they mentioned this to Frederick, he said that Adrianne asked to walk her home, and then she said she needed to hurry up. She took off her shoes and ran. According to the man, he had no choice but to run with her. He claimed he did not pursue her, he kept her company. At some point, the detectives got tired of listening to his constantly changing stories and accused him of attacking Adrianne. They informed him that his DNA was on the sheet, Adrianne's body, and many other things in her house. When Frederick realized that he would not be able to get away with it, he tried to convince everyone he was acting out of self-defense. Now, his memory has returned. He said he and Adrianne came to her house, where they had consensual intercourse. After that, Adrianne felt sick, and they went to the bathroom where she threw up. Next, they started fighting. At some point, Adrianne pulled out a knife, threatened him, and attempted to injure him. He exercised his right to self-defense, which ended with Adrianne dying. Allegedly, Frederick panicked and did not know what to do. He decided not to call 911. Instead, he ran away because he understood they would blame him for the woman's death. The police charged Thomas Frederick with first-degree deprivation of life. In January 2014, he appeared in court. During the trial, the prosecutor presented his version of what happened that night. Adrianne and Jay drank some alcohol at home and then went to Diamond Dolls in a good mood. There, Thomas Frederick sat down at a table with them. The man seemed to them quite an ordinary person. They were chatting casually and just relaxing. The next day, Adrianne had to move her things to her and Justin's new house, and she decided to leave earlier, while Jay decided to stay at the club. Frederick decided to take advantage of this situation and followed her. She didn't want him to accompany her and tried to run away from him, but she couldn't. He chased her all the way home, and when she went inside, he broke in, took a knife from the kitchen, and did what he went after Adrianne for. According to the prosecutor, the injuries on her body indicated that the intercourse with Frederick was not consensual. After that, he decided to end Adrianne's life because she could report him to the police. He tried to cover his tracks and cut out the part of the sheet on which his seminal fluid remained. However, it didn't prevent the police from finding the criminal's DNA. After all, it was on many other places, including Adrianne's body. Then he took her car keys, drove a few blocks, and abandoned the car. Adrianne's parents left the courtroom during the medical examiner's statement. "I didn't want to hear that," Mark Roberts said. "That doesn't bring her back, and I didn't want to know what she went through. From what I gather, she fought very hard." Life without their daughter has been a struggle for Mark and Dolores Robert. "It's definitely going to still take a while for us because we just lost the most precious thing in our lives," he said. "We'll get back on our feet because that would be something that Adrianne would want. And it's going to take a little while, but yeah, we're going to get there." Thomas Frederick's defense tried to make Adrianne look bad. At the trial, his lawyer said Adrianne invited Frederick to her home to have consensual intercourse with him. This version has no basis and may be just an attempt of the perpetrator to justify his appearance in the victim's house. The undeniable fact is the presence of DNA, which points to only one person. Frederick's defense also tried to convince the jury that he acted in self-defense. She did sustain a stab wound as he was fighting her off, his lawyer said. An attempt to convince the jury it was self-defense failed. The jury found Thomas Frederick guilty of first-degree life deprivation and stealing Adrianne's car. Due to a lack of evidence, they didn't accuse him of forcing her into intimacy by threatening her with a knife. The court sentenced the 25-year-old Thomas Hampton Frederick to life in prison without parole. Adrianne's father said he and his wife were elated to learn that Frederick would spend the rest of his life in prison. It doesn't bring Adrianne back, but justice was served today. It was hard to be in the same room with the man who murdered his daughter and keep his emotions in check, he said. Frederick showed no sympathy or remorse, not even when the jury rendered its verdict. Instead, the man acted very cocky. Robert and his wife, Dolores, wept when the verdict was read aloud in the courtroom. "We were so happy," he said. She just loved to live life. Her smile was infectious. It's sad that we'll never see that again. Adrianne's family thanked everyone who supported them during this difficult time, including the police and the prosecutor, thanks to whom the criminal suffered a well-deserved punishment.